Good morning, and welcome to All Souls on this beautiful, mild winter day. Welcome to those present here in the room and to those joining us by live stream. I'm Kendall Gibbons. I'm the senior minister. It is good to be here with you today. We take pleasure in greeting our guests and visitors. Are there any members who have brought a guest or met a visitor that they would like to introduce? Anybody? Yes, Karen.
My daughter, Susie Steffen, is from Oregon.
Welcome. Anyone else? Yes.
My friend David is from Poland.
Welcome. Welcome. Yes.
My granddaughter is Roy.
Welcome. Anyone else? Are there any visitors who would be kind enough just to introduce yourselves and tell us where you're from? Well, welcome to everyone. We invite you to join us for coffee and conversation in the foyer outside this room following worship. Stop by the visitor table where friendly folks can answer your questions and give you information about a variety of church activities. Be aware that this room has 2 emergency exits up here, as well as the doors behind you. Please notice the announcements that are in your bulletin and on the screen, and know that mostly all meetings are open to everyone. We welcome your questions, responses, and comments about the service on Twitter and on our Facebook page. This morning, a service of a different kind for the holiday season. We have recently noted the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended the First World War, the war that, it was said, would end all wars. This morning's story of the Christmas truce comes from the early months of that war, before the soldiers on both sides had lost their sense of common humanity. May the light of our flaming chalice this morning rekindle that connection within each of us today, and may we never, even in the most terrible moments, entirely lose sight of it.
Hello. My name is Rose, and I light this chalice for the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
Thank you. Now let's rise and speak once more the words of our community's mutual promise. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
O come, desire of nations abide in one of the hearts of humankind. Bid thou our sad divisions cease, and lead us in the ways of peace. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
The third Sunday in Advent honors the joy of waiting. That in the midst of longing for a future that is yet to come, there are still moments of present joy. The story we tell today is about a moment of joy in the midst of terrible suffering and tragedy. The teacher whose birth we celebrate at Christmas once said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." May we all learn to be peacemakers in our world, in this season and always.
Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
On August 4th, 1914, the British government protested the invasion of Belgium by German armed forces. And receiving a defiant reply from their high command, formally declared war on Germany. By August 7th, the British Expeditionary Force had arrived in France. The troops were in high spirits, seeing this war as a brief adventure that would surely be over by the end of the year. Soon, the miseries of trench warfare made themselves apparent. As the men slogged through endless miles of mud on the French front lines and hunkered down in waist-high ditches, often flea-ridden and sick. In the chilling autumn rain, they waited wretchedly for opportunities to shoot at the enemy in filthy ditches of their own, yards away.
I wonder as I wander up under the sky, how Jesus the Savior did come for to die for poor ordinary people like you and like I. I wonder as I wander out under the sky.
Far from the heroic excitement that the young soldiers had promised themselves, the war became a weary, tedious, and tragic endurance, with grotesque wounds and arbitrary death around each corner. The generals who ordered their movements, of course, did not share their daily danger or their deplorable conditions. The grim realities of war began to sink in, as they always do to those who are sent to fight. As December came on, the horrible mud of the trenches hardened into frozen ground, and it became clear that far from being home by Christmas, soldiers on both sides of the line would be spending their holiday exactly where they were. Everyone says that it started with the carols. Many of the German soldiers had received care packages from home, along with small Christmas trees and evergreen wreaths to offer a little holiday cheer. On Christmas Eve, some attached these seasonal symbols to poles or boards and lifted them above the trenches, where they could also be seen by the enemy. And of course, they sang. Not to be outdone vocally, the British troops raised their own carols, and it gradually became a back and forth sing-along.
Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round young virgin, mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild. Sleep in heavenly peace. Sleep in heavenly
By the dawn of Christmas Day, a few hardy souls looked out from their positions on each side and proposed a temporary truce for the purpose of recovering the bodies of fallen comrades that gruesomely littered the no man's land between their trench positions. I like to think it began with a cigarette among the grim corpse detail where the British and German dead lay intermingled as one exhausted young litter bearer, gathering up the remains of his comrades, offered his counterpart from the other side a smoke. That small gesture of common humanity, coupled with the exchange of songs the night before, opened a brief door of mutual recognition and compassion. Throughout the month of December, 460,000 parcels from home, as well as 2.5 million letters, had been received by the British soldiers in France. King George V sent a card to every service member, and his daughter, Princess Mary, lent her name to a fund which sent a small brass box of gifts, including tobacco and writing sets, to every soldier on the front lines. German troops had also been sent care packages, which included sausages and cigars. As the men became convinced that the truce would hold, at least for Christmas Day, they began to emerge from the trenches and to share these meager treats. Those who had photos from loved ones at home proudly showed them. One fellow who had been a barber in civilian life set up a chair and offered free haircuts to all comers. At another place, a bag stuffed with rags became an impromptu soccer ball for a match between the Krauts and the Brits. There were shared prayers for the dead. There was more singing. For a little while, war itself was the enemy, and the common soldiers of both sides were brothers in arms.
All hail to the days that never more praised than all the rest of the year. And welcome the nights that double delights, as well for the poor and the peer. Good fortune attend each merry man's friend, that doth of the best may be there. Forgetting old wrongs with carols and songs, to drive the cold winter away.
This time of the year is spent in good cheer, as neighbors together to meet, to sit by the fire with friendly side, each other in love to greet. All grudges forgot, all broken apart, all sorrows aside they lay. I old and I young, but careless song, to drive the cold winter away. To mass and to walk, our neighbors have gone, with hopes of yachts without name. To drink and carouse, to open the house, as merry as possible again. When cake and cheese are brought for your feast, to make you a longer stay. We'll find you warm, we'll do you no harm, to drive the cold winter away. When mighty many frosts have weathered his rest, and fallen from branch and from brine, in time we pause from husbandry roast, from hunger and country and swine. Together to go, to plow, to sow, together to food and away. And most content, good time we have spent, to drive the winter away.
For the short hours of one December day in 1914, a handful of men who shared the miseries of trench warfare reclaimed their common humanity and brought the true meaning of Jesus' teachings to life among them. Weeks earlier, on December 7th, Pope Benedict XV had called for an official truce of God in which all hostilities would cease over the Christmas period. Military authorities rejected the idea. It was the ordinary foot soldiers, seeing that they had more in common with each other than with their own politicians and generals, who brought the spirit of Christmas to the desolate battlefield they shared.
British novelist Thomas Hardy wrote this poem in 1902. It's called The Man He Killed. Eddie and I by chance but met by some old ancient inn. We should have set us right down to wet many a napkin. But ranged we was in infantry, staring face to face. I shot at him as he at me, and killed him in his place. I shot him dead because he was my foe. Just so, my foe, of course he was. That's clear enough. Although he thought he'd enlist, perhaps, offhand, like just as I was out of work, as old as traps. No other reason why. Yes, quaint and curious war is. You shoot a fella down, you'd treat if met where any bar is, or help to half a crown.
Reports and photographs of these small-scale, unofficial ceasefires reached the papers back home and the military authorities. British High Command was angry. They feared that the men would now question the war and even mutiny as a result of fraternizing with the enemy they were meant to defeat. Stricter orders were issued to end such activities, along with harsh punishment for any man caught refusing to fight. As the war continued, brutal developments on the battlefield changed the character of fighting in 1915. The enemy were further demonized and fraternization made even less likely. The small truces of 1914 never happened again. But despite the best efforts of the authorities, the story of the Christmas truces was out there in the media and the popular imagination. A story that has been retold and reshaped many times in the decades that have followed, inspiring succeeding generations to question the demand for war and to commit ourselves once again to the inclusive Christmas spirit of peace on earth.
Story of the Christmas truce has inspired you to find the deeper meaning of the holiday spirit for all people everywhere. We also hope you appreciate the extensive preparation and work by both our volunteers and our professionals. In an effort to keep these high-quality presentations continuing at All Souls, the budget requires that the music and religious education raise $12,000 to support these vital programs. So far this year, we have raised about a fifth of that amount. Please give generously to today's offering, which supports the music and religious education program. Thank you.
And while you are being generous, we invite you also to sing. This morning's offering will now be given and gratefully received.
go.